took hold. And so we have a responsibility for views in terms of education.
That's good, yeah. Block me. That's a banner.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Woo! It's a great day to be in Florida. I have the honor and privilege of introducing the combatant of critical race theory, a champion for parental rights, and our warrior for Florida. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand to your feet for the best governor in the nation, Governor Ron DeSantis.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's always wonderful to be in Florida's friendliest hometown, which happens to be the center of the freest state in the United States. We've got a lot of great folks here, and I want to thank Keisha King for the introduction. We have a number of people in my administration, Simone Marsteller, our Secretary for the Agency of Healthcare Administration. We have our Commissioner of Education, Richard Corcoran. We also have legislators, Senator Baxley, Representatives Ingoglia, Trunow, and Representative Randy Fine. We have Christopher Rufo, who's the leading opponent of CRT from the Manhattan Institute. We have Dr. Matt Spalding, professor in constitutional government in Hillsdale College. And then we have Lele, did I say that right? Lolly. Yeah, we have Lolly Jimenez Hincapi, who's a mother, who's going to talk about her views in terms of education. Then we have Lakeisha Howell, who's also a mother from Sarasota County, and she's going to come up and say a few things. And education really is so very important. And I think it's important that in Florida, we continue to do a lot of the good things that we have done. Education Week, the latest rankings rank Florida number 3 for K through 12 achievement in the whole country. And that wasn't true when I was growing up here, I'll tell you that. And so we have, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the things we don't want to see in our schools and in our society, but I think it's important to say, what are we doing positively in terms of what we want to be in our schools? And I think we've done more than any other state to place a renewed emphasis on American civics and teaching kids about the Constitution and what it means to be an American. And we've been able to get requirements back into the high schools, which is very important. We have the ability, and we'll be doing exams when people leave school, which will be like a citizenship exam that naturalized immigrants have to take. Because at the end of the day, everybody that comes through our school system, some will go into a variety of different fields, but everyone's going to be an American citizen, and they're going to have duties and responsibilities, and they need to understand what that means, and they need to understand the principles that our country was founded upon. We also have been able to help teachers. We just launched, and it's going to come into effect next year, the civics, we call it like a civics training program, where if you go through it, really get deep knowledge and understanding on the fundamentals, you get a $3,000 bonus. And so that's something that we think is very positive. So we want all our students to understand, why was our country founded? What were some of the key ideas that made us different? I mean, for example, our founding fathers said that we are endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights. The rights do not come from government. So these are natural rights, and we create a constitutional system not to give us rights, but to protect the rights that we already have. And we have a constitutional system that's laid out, and not just having a judiciary, an executive, a legislature, but also having 50 state governments and federalism and all these different things that are designed to be able to maintain and preserve a free society. And we've seen those ideas tested over the years throughout our history, and you've had different people with different views about it. I mean, if you look at President Lincoln, when before he became president, running for the Senate, he was running against a guy named Stephen Douglas, and Douglas was basically saying that, the founders, wanted slavery, it was important to have, and all of a sudden Lincoln said, no, that wasn't what they wanted. They disfavored it. They wanted it to go away. They created the Declaration of Independence to say everybody had rights. And so Lincoln prevailed ultimately in that debate once he became elected president. And then you look at what people in our country have done, defeating Nazism in World War II, when the world really hung in the balance. And that was America that did it. And they did it because they believed in having a free society. You think about what MLK stood for. He said he didn't want people judged on the color of their skin, but on the content of their character. You listen to some of these people nowadays, they don't talk about that. And then more recently, it was the United States that was able to win the Cold War and defeat Soviet communism. Now, I think that there's more of these people coming out of the woodwork than we ever thought nowadays, which is unfortunate. And there's a lot of problems with Marxism in our hemisphere, and we see what's going on with authoritarian countries like China. But nevertheless, people thought that we wouldn't be able to beat the Soviet Union, and we did it. And so these are really important things that people need to have a great understanding of. And I think what you see now with the rise of this woke ideology is an attempt to really delegitimize our history and to delegitimize our institutions. And I view the wokeness as a form of cultural Marxism. They want to tear... They want to just, it's not just, people say, oh, they're leftists or socialists. It's not just like taxes and all that. Yeah, they do want that, and that's not good. But they really want to tear at the fabric of our society and our culture and things that really we've taken for granted, like the ability of parents to direct the upbringing of their kids. So this is really, really significant. And when you see these things throughout the country, where they take down Thomas Jefferson's statue in New York City, where they take down Abraham Lincoln in Massachusetts, where they take George Washington's name off schools in California, that is an attempt to erase history. They want to delegitimize the founding of the country and the institutions, and they basically want to replace it with a very militant form of leftism that would absolutely destroy this country if that ever took hold. And so we have a responsibility to stand for the truth, to stand for what's right, and we're doing that, and we've put more resources and emphasis on teaching civics, on teaching people about American history. But we also have to protect people and protect our kids from some very pernicious ideologies that are trying to be forced upon them all across the country. So earlier this year, I directed the Florida Department of Education to prohibit critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. And you'll hear these people. They made it. It was a big deal in Virginia. These counties, parents were really upset, and a lot of the media big, oh, it's not happening, and they would basically act like this is all just made up. Well, let me show you some of the things that have been done throughout our country just in the last couple years. The Arizona Department of Education created a, quote, equity toolkit, claiming that babies show the first sign of racism at 3 months old, and that white children become full racists, quote, strongly biased in favor of whiteness by age 5. Santa Clara County Office of Education denounced the United States as a, quote, parasitic system based on, quote, the invasion of, quote, white male settlers, and encouraged teachers to cash in on kids' inherent empathy in order to recruit them into political activism. And a Philadelphia elementary school forced 5th graders to celebrate black communism and simulated a black power rally to, quote, free Angela Davis from prison. And at that particular school, 87% of students fail to achieve basic literacy by graduation. And so this is something that you see all across the country, and we have a responsibility in Florida to say we're not going to do it. So we did do that. So it violates Florida standards to scapegoat someone based on their race, to say that they're inherently racist, to say that they're an oppressor or oppressed or any of that. And that's good and that's important. But we also have to realize that we got to do more to make sure that that actually carries the day in the classrooms and in our society. So today we are going to be introducing to the public, and we have legislators who are going to help us with this, a new piece of legislation for the upcoming legislative session called Stop Wrongs Against Our Kids and Employees Act, the Stop Woke Act. And it's something that and this will do a number of things that are very important. One, it will put into statute the Department of Education's prohibition on CRT in K through 12 schools. No taxpayer dollars should be used to teach our kids to hate our country or to hate each other. And that's important, and that's all well and good, but I think what we've seen recently is you can legislate things like Parents' Bill of Rights. You can have certain things, and sometimes the school districts don't always follow it. And so we are going to be including in this legislation giving parents a private right of action to be able to enforce the prohibition on CRT, and they get to recover attorney's fees when they prevail, which is very important. And yes, there will be a fortified ability for the State Department of Education to hold people accountable. But honestly, the parents know best what's going on, and they're in the best position to be able to do it. And here's the thing. A lot of times these people will fear lawsuits more than a fine from the State Department of Education, because when you do a lawsuit, you get discovery and you're subject to that. And when they say they're not doing CRT and then you have all this information showing that they are doing it, it really is an uncomfortable position for them. So I think that gives parents the ability to go in and ensure that our state standards are being followed, and I think it's something that needs to be done. We also need to understand that this has become a cottage industry, this CRT. There's people making huge amounts of money. They basically will get tens of thousands of dollars to go in and do a training, sometimes at schools, sometimes at businesses, basically saying like, okay, pay me $50,000 so I can teach your employees how racist capitalism is, or something like that. And I'm just thinking to myself, well, you're certainly charging a king's ransom to do that. You don't complain about capitalism when you're lining your own pocket. It's just when other people are doing well. But the issue is you have these whole cottage industry of these consultants that will come and they'll go into a school district, or they'll go to a business, and they'll go to colleges and universities, and they bring a lot of this into those institutions, and they call it equity. Just understand, when you hear equity used, that is just an ability for people to smuggle in their ideology. Because we don't need to have these terms. We have society based on equality, where you're treated equally regardless of your upbringing, regardless of your race. You have the same rights and privileges as anybody else. Equity is used to put the thumb on the scale in favor of their ideology. And so that's where you get things like CRT and a whole host of other things. So our legislation will defund any money for K-12 or higher ed going to CRT consultants. We are also not going to allow the staff or employees or teachers in our education system to be subjected to to that type of training where they're forced to sit there and listen. And they have had this in different parts of the country. The San Diego Public Schools did a training where they accused white teachers of being colonizers on stolen land and told them, quote, "You are racist," and quote, "You are upholding racist ideas, structures, and policies." And they recommended that the teachers undergo, quote, "anti-racist therapy." So this is wrong when it's done to our kids, but it's also wrong to force employees to have to go through that. So you are not going to have that in any school in the state of Florida, which is good. But you know, it's not just in schools, and I know that's been a big focus, and understandably so, because parents send their kids. I think most parents just want them to be educated on kind of the basics. I don't think that they're interested in this indoctrination. I know I'm not, and I know most of you are not. And it's important. And it is wrong when you're trying to take a kid who's there to learn basics and you're putting ideology and you're trying to indoctrinate. But this also goes beyond education, and it goes beyond just schooling. And it really has become something that is being utilized by corporate America to, I think, create hostile work environments for many of their employees. And you look at what some of these big companies have done in recent years. Bank of America has had training teaching that the United States is a system of, quote, white supremacy, and encourages their employees to become woke at work. Verizon has taught employees that America is fundamentally racist, and they've even promoted defunding the police. And a Google employee program claims that America is, quote, a system of white supremacy, and that all Americans are, quote, raised to be racist. And so that is some of the stuff that we're seeing. And, I think about it, if you're in a company and someone's telling, dirty jokes or doing this, that could be considered a hostile work environment. Well, how is it not a hostile work environment to be attacking people based on their race, or telling them that they're privileged or that they're part of oppressive systems, when all they're doing is showing up to work and trying to earn a living? So we believe that this corporate CRT, it's basically corporate sanctioned racism, and they're trying to shove it down these employees' throats. We believe that that violates the Florida civil rights laws, but if to the extent it doesn't, we're going to make sure that the law does include this into these laws, so that employees have an ability to protect themselves against this kind of, really, which is harassment. And some of these companies, you just think about like what goes through. A lot of this is virtue signaling. They don't want to be criticized on Twitter or by the mob or something like that. But you had a lot of these companies, last year when we had the protests and the rioting, they were supporting a lot of these organizations. BLM is a radical organization. They were pouring millions of dollars into it. Now they're all concerned because that ideology has been put into place in places like San Francisco and these other places where they don't prosecute people stealing things out of the stores. So they want Congress now to come in and say, hey, stop the smash and grabs. Well, they're partially responsible for creating an environment by having these people elected to office. So we think the corporate CRT is just wrong. We do not want any workers in Florida to be subjected to this, and we're going to make sure that is the case. And so if you look at what we've done in Florida, we've basically just stood for opportunity for everybody. If you look what we've done in education, we've expanded opportunity to folks that have never had the opportunity we've had now. You look at the different folks here who are all united in not having either state-sanctioned or corporate-sanctioned racism in our state. But this is something that's significant, and they've tried to act like it's not happening. And you'll have media who will say that this doesn't happen, even though we have all these examples. And you should hear Rufo. He's got many, many more examples of this. So it is happening, and I think we have an ability to just draw a line in the sand and say that's not the type of society that we want here in the state of Florida. We want people treated equally. We don't want ideology. So we're gonna hear from some folks who've got some good things to say. So I'm gonna bring up them, and we look forward to hearing those remarks. So first, I'm gonna bring up from the Manhattan Institute. Really has done more than anybody else in our country on exposing CRT in education and in corporate America, Christopher Rufo.
It's great to be with you, and it's great to be in the free state of Florida. I come from the Seattle, Washington area in the slightly less free state of Washington. But why I'm here is because I spent the last year of my life meticulously documenting critical race theory in American institutions. I first started in the federal government, where I found that among the training programs, they were teaching America's nuclear weapons engineers, serious people, to denounce themselves for their identity, to apologize for their whiteness, and then to denounce the country itself. I think creating a national security risk. And I went through these agencies time after time, and I discovered that all of these training programs that we're starting to see in the universities, where we've come to kind of expect it, in corporations, in the federal government, and even in K through 12 schools, teaching kids as young as 3 and 4 years old that they're inherently privileged or oppressive or oppressed, telling white students that they should be feeling guilty or ashamed for their identity, and then telling minority students that their life can't amount to anything, all the deck is stacked against them, and filling them with these dark emotions of pessimism and despair. And as I look through these documents, as I look through these training programs, I found that they all can be filtered back to the ideology known as critical race theory, that started in the universities and then has moved through our bureaucratic institutions, where I think now it's become the dominant ideological orientation in elite institutions everywhere. And so I'm working on these programs. Our former president, President Trump, took on the issue. But what I really have been inspired by the last year is that there is a new group of people emerging and asserting the authority of the American people. These are American parents. It's one thing to have critical race theory in the universities. You can ignore it. It's one thing to have critical race theory even in the federal bureaucracy. It doesn't affect you. But what happened is, in the last year, they have accelerated critical race theory in K through 12 public schools, and they've done something that no government should do. Step between parent and child. And I might be old-fashioned, but I still think that parents have the primary responsibility in shaping their children's moral and educational development. So while many of us were feeling a bit demoralized by the state of our country, by the pervasiveness of critical race theory, parents stood up and took action. You started seeing these incredible videos, including from parents here in the state of Florida, going to school board meetings, reviving the American tradition of democratic participation at the most local level. But then something very pernicious happened. The Biden administration, the permanent bureaucracy, the teachers' unions started fighting back, even starting to investigate parents as domestic terrorists, mobilizing the FBI against moms and dads that simply want a good education free of racialist ideology and indoctrination. But this isn't a battle about CRT or no CRT. This is a battle about who our society and our democracy and our government is for. And we are making the argument, and Governor Ron DeSantis is the leader, saying that American democracy is for the people. It has to be accountable to the American citizens. And as a journalist, as a policy researcher, we spend a lot of time in these abstract ideas. We do reports. We hope that they get picked up. But I'll tell you right now, the whole country is watching the state of Florida. There are a lot of smaller states that are intimidated by the bureaucrats, intimidated by the corporations, intimidated by the teachers' unions. But in the state of Florida, you have leadership that is bold and fearless and taking action. And with the very clever acronym, the Stop Woke Act, Governor Ron DeSantis is laying a marker And he's not only protecting all of the employees and students in the state of Florida, he's providing a model for every state in the United States of America. And I'll just close by saying that critical race theory is wrong. It offers nothing to improve the lives of anyone of any racial background. The latest polling data suggests that among parents of all racial groups, they oppose critical race theory in the curriculum by a 42% margin. And so the task at hand right now is to turn public sentiment. It's to turn this parent movement that is sweeping the nation into concrete policy. That's what this is. Let's get this done.
He might know a few things about critical race theory. I think that's pretty apparent. But, you know, he pointed out something that's very important. In terms of the public, our friends, our neighbors throughout Florida and throughout the country, nobody wants this crap. Okay, this is an elite-driven phenomenon being driven by bureaucratic elites, elites in universities, and elites in corporate America, and they're trying to shove it down the throats of the American people. You're not doing that here in the state of Florida. Next, I'd like to welcome somebody that's been involved in studying and teaching people about our Constitution and our great traditions for a long time now at Hillsdale College, Dr. Matthew Spalding.
Morning. Great to be with you. Some of you might have heard of Hillsdale College. It's a little college in Michigan. I'm very happy to be working with this governor on education, which I think is right now one of the most important issues in our country that we face. But I have to say something else about this governor. You know, we got 50 of them, but you've got someone here who knows what they're against, but also what they're for. And that's crucially important. And I will remind you, in our constitutional structure, the federal government does not run our lives. The great authority on this question is at the state level, which means the governor is the crucial person in starting this effort. In 2026, we're going to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, the most important freedom document in the history of Western civilization. We got to be ready for that. That was the document that proclaims that all men are created equal, that Martin Luther King said was a promissory note to all people, regardless of the color of their skin. Yet some people today want to teach the exact opposite, that we're not created equal, and that somehow our race determines what rights we have and what we don't have. That's not history, that's ideology, and it shouldn't be in our classrooms. This is why Florida's effort on civic education is so important. Abraham Lincoln once described the fundamental principles of America as the standard maxims of a free society. Familiar to all, revered by all, constantly looked to, constantly labored for, and even though not perfectly attained, constantly approximated. American history has had its share of mistakes and wrongs, to be sure, but yet no nation in the history of the world has strived harder and done more to advance those principles. The remarkable achievement, the remarkable American story unfolds under and because of those principles. The civic mission of our schools, the reason that government is interested in education, is to share and impart that core knowledge of those universal truths to our students. And that's where it has to be again. And it's starting in this state of Florida. I believe, I was telling the governor earlier, I think we're on the cusp of a moment in which the idea of education as an issue is realigning. It's no longer merely a question of budget or policy, but it's about returning it to its rightful place in the formation of good citizens. This is not the responsibility of states. It is the responsibility of states, not the federal government. It's the responsibility of elected school boards, not educational experts. Of classroom teachers, not bureaucrats. And most important, parents. Who have a fundamental right to teach their children and what the American founders referred to, the family, they called it the seminary of the republic. It is the place where they are formed. And it's the job of the state and of governors and all those involved to protect that fundamental relationship. We must teach our students honest and true history of America that's unified and inspiring. I commend the governor and Richard Corkin for the great work they're doing in doing so, in rekindling what Washington called the sacred fire of liberty. And I hope that fire becomes a wildfire across the whole country.
All right, Laylee, where are you?
Right here. Thank you, Governor. Thank you so much. You can butcher my name anytime. Good morning. Firstly, I am grateful to God, the governor, and his team for the opportunity to be here with you guys. My full name is Eulalia Maria Jimenez. I am the mother, try that one. I'm the mother of 6 beautiful children, a holistic therapist, small business owner, and the Moms for Liberty Miami-Dade chapter chair. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, of Cuban parents. My father was a political prisoner in Cuba. After serving his time, he fled Cuba, leaving behind a wife and a son. I have never been politically inclined. In fact, I was very resentful of politics. I grew up feeling that it made my father bitter. He and I often fought over his perceived fear of communism infiltrating our country. I used to laugh and say, "Papi, you're crazy. This is the United States of America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. Communism will never come into this country." And plus, I was busy living the American dream. 2020 was my rude awakening. The pandemic, lockdowns, mandates. The truth is that for me, the race wars is what hit hardest. The looting, vandalized businesses, the burning of our flag. My father's stories were now so vivid. Suddenly, his worst nightmare was a reality. History repeating itself. I was beyond scared for my children. I felt this calling very deep in my soul. I wanted to. I needed to do more. So after an enormous amount of emotions, anger, the array, you name it, lots of prayer, I found Moms for Liberty and it resonated. What better way to serve my country, protect my children, and honor my father? I won't lie, it was overwhelming. It still is. So much I had overlooked in the school system. I was disappointed that for so long I had trusted the system and not questioned anything. This is not a secret anymore. There's a full-on attack on humanity, our country, our children. We have been complacent, and in this complacency, our freedoms are being stripped. God has been removed from our schools. The Pledge of Allegiance, although Florida law, sometimes is not recited. American history replaced by critical race theory. Certain manipulated versions of this theory prove it is a direct attack on the mental and emotional well-being of the children. Kids are guilted and indebted based on their race. CRT, no matter which way you slice it, breeds division and segregation. Our schools are meant to be safe, fun, and about learning. Our history may not be perfect, but our country's evolution is far past this. Our children deserve to know this history and to be proud of it. Not a day goes by where I'm not grateful for this state we live in, for our governor, who fights relentlessly for the people of Florida. But it is we, the people, who must rise, unite, demand, and fight for our God-given rights and freedom. Not only for ourselves and for our children, but for our nation as a whole. The time is now, and I don't want to overextend this too much, but I remember growing up, my father had an American flag, always, not only on him, but on our house, in his car. And under the American flag, he had the Cuban flag. And the Cuban flag was always smaller than the American flag. And I used to always think to myself, you know, little girl, it's not his country of origin. Cuba is. And he never got over, you know, his fight for his country and leaving his family behind. But now more than ever, I understand my father. He loved this country. It was the country that gave him a second opportunity to rebuild himself. It is the home of the free and the land of the brave, or vice versa. But my father would have died for this country. And my children deserve to learn that. God bless us all. God bless America. Thank you so much.
You're wonderful. That was so good. Thank you for doing it. Yes, yes, thank you. I mean, you guys are in, I mean, isn't this good stuff with these five? All right, Lakeisha Howell from Sarasota, where are you? Thank you so much.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. My name's Lakeisha Howell. I wrote a little speech, but I think I'm going to just ad-lib instead. I am a mother of three. I'm from Sarasota County. I'm also a part of Moms for Liberty. I kind of wanted to just come and give my perspective as a parent and how CRT, which hasn't directly been implemented in Sarasota County schools, but there are forms of it. We have social emotional learning, which is implemented, and the funding behind that, and they're getting around it, just not calling it CRT, so to speak. I have two kids that are currently in the county school system, one that is set to start kindergarten next year. And I've teetered on the decision on pulling them from public schooling due to the decisions and the things that have taken place over the last 2 years, especially starting with the coronavirus, and now with CRT. I'm a biracial mother. My kids are biracial. My grandmother is an immigrant from Ireland. And I grew up with the, more so the white side of my family, the Irish side. And that's who I was raised by. And, you know, one day, there's a little quick story, my 8-year-old came home from school and wanting to know, Mommy, why does Mimi, who's her grandmother, why does Mimi and people like Mimi, why do they feel like we're not good enough? And I was, honey, what do you mean? She's like, well, I always hear that people of color, people with brown skin like me, like we're oppressed or we're not good enough or it's harder for us. And I don't want my kids to be taught that. We should all be on an equal playing field. And at 8 years old, why is my kid coming home? And it's caused, you know, Lily's a therapist, it's caused a lot of anxiety and depression in school-age children, which isn't okay. We need to get back to the basics, reading, math, arithmetic. And CRT is not something I agree with at all, being especially a person of color. I think it gives a very bad taste in my mouth. It's shoving things down my kids' throat that should be taught by me at home, not by their educators. Their educators need to teach them the basics. They don't even have the mind frame to be able to comprehend a lot of these things that are being taught. And, you know, we could get into the subject of the LGBTQ and all these other things. Kids are coming home telling parents at the age of 5 and 6, oh, Mom, I'm biracial, or sorry, not biracial, I'm bi, or I'm a lesbian, I'm this. And this is not what we need to be teaching in our schools. Our kids need to... Our kids need to be taught the they're too young and they're too fragile to be having these things put in their brain. My kids need to learn that they're just as equal as their cousins who are people with lighter skin, and just as equal as people with darker skin as them. They're a people of color just like me, and that's what we need to get back to, is the basics, and not teaching our kids these things that are even uncomprehendable to them. So I'm very much so against it. Like I said, I wrote a little speech, but I kind of wanted to ad-lib instead. I just felt like I wanted to speak from my heart. Yeah. And thank you. That's pretty much it. I just wanted to really thank you for allowing me to be here today and just touch on the subject of what I've had. I'm still teetering on the fact of pulling my kids from public school, depending on how this all plays out, but I have confidence in you as our governor to get these things done.
Well, look, parents, we believe in school choice. Parents can make these decisions, and that's absolutely great. But how bad would it be that she feels compelled that she may have to take her kids out because this is seeping in? That's why it's so important that we're doing what we're doing here and in the next legislative session. We have our Lieutenant Governor, Jeanette Nunez.
Good morning. What a pleasure it is to be here with you all. And I just want to thank our governor for his bold leadership with this proposed legislation that will put an end to the disease that is wokeism, that will make sure that we do not endanger our children, our students, our employees, and ultimately our country. And so Governor DeSantis is right. Here in Florida, we are not going to bow down to the altar of the progressive left. I don't know about you, but I refuse to embrace these ridiculous woke terms like Latinx. That's not happening. I can tell you, I am proud to stand here as the first Latina lieutenant governor in the history of our great state. And I am offended by that term Latinx. And you know it's bad when the left-leaning fake news Miami Herald editorial board begs Democrats and progressives to drop the term. So this important legislation that will provide tools to our parents, our students, our employees, it is so important to make sure that we do not allow this type of discrimination. The same people that want to push Latinx and peddle that dangerous ideology that has its roots in critical race theory, I'll tell you something. Critical race theory is basically Marxism. The same Marxism that ushered in brutality. The darkest brutality in history that is obviously something that the Democrats love to romanticize, and they like to talk about socialism as this wonderful thing. We know the truth here in Florida, and we have a governor that stands firm every single day. As I was listening to Lali's story, it obviously impacted me because many of you may know my parents came to this country in 1961 from communist Cuba, fleeing the oppression, fleeing the indoctrination that we're seeing at the hands of CRT. And that is something that I will tell you. My parents, they loved this country. They came here with nothing more than the clothes on their back, but they were filled with courage, they were filled with hope, and they were filled primarily with gratitude. Gratitude for the greatest country in the history of Earth. And instead of using these terms and this ideology to divide us and to sow rancor, I'll tell you, why don't we unite and celebrate what makes us great? What makes us Floridians, what makes us Americans. And I can tell you, whether you're 7th generation or 1st generation, the most important thing is appreciation for this great country. And so I, for one, will not stand idly by while those that want to spew their venom and destroy our country have a platform here in Florida. And I know we have a governor that will not stand by. He fights every single day. And I am thrilled that you all are here to join us on this journey to make sure that our efforts will keep Florida not only free, but woke free. Thank you all so very much. May God bless you.
Okay, Commissioner of Education, Richard Corcoran.
Thank you. No, it seems like forever ago, but it was a short time ago that the governor selected me to be the Commissioner of Education. And from day one, as you guys all know, he hit the road, not running, but speeding down the highway. We have just transformed education under his leadership. One of the first things we did is we took at the Department of Education, because you heard it from Dr. Spalding from Hillsdale, you heard it from the governor, and we wanted people who walked into the building to understand what's the purpose of education. You hear so much now, we just got to get a job, you got to do this, but education is so much more. And so we quote Frederick Douglass in our building if you come. And Frederick Douglass, who escaped slavery, said that education is the uplifting of the human soul to the glorious light of truth. And what you have at play today, he went on to say, which is important, that to deny someone that world-class education, that beauty, that truth, that goodness, is the greatest crime against humanity. And so what you have today is this, literally, it's been going on for half a century or more, this indoctrination and this taking over our school system. And all the great philosophers, all the way back to Plato, would say, if you want to show me how you're educating your children, and I'll tell you your country's future. And you could say that today. And this governor has come in from our standards to teacher compensation to every aspect, civics. We have the first civics reading list in the history of the country in any state. But what's happened with that great thing to raise up great citizens and give them that great truth, what's happened is, as you heard Christopher say, this isn't just wrong, CRT. You know, to think about it, we had to pass a rule that the governor talked about earlier this year that said we're going to ban CRT in our schools as a department. And really what the rule said was, you must teach that which is objective and true. And what Christopher's saying is that the CRT is just wrong. It's even more than that. It's an untruth. It's a lie. And we're having to fight against having our children indoctrinated on lies. And so to put a Stop Woke Act into the legislation and have it permanently so that it's no longer in corporate boardrooms, no longer in classrooms, is going to be transformational. And it leads to that which is good and true and beautiful. And that is a constitutional republic that will survive with a generation of kids who are educated on the truth, whose souls have been fed that glorious light of truth to keep and preserve this country for another 230 years. So thank you for doing this, Governor.
You know, I think a number of the speakers kind of raised the point, but you know, when I cited some of these school districts across the country that are doing all these crazy things, I'm just thinking to myself, are you doing so good at reading and math and all these other things that you can divert all this attention to ideology and indoctrination? I mean, come on. Most of those places that are doing that are performing much worse than any place in Florida. And so we do have to, what Lakeisha said, is really focus on the foundations, on the basic pillars of what a good education is. And of course, certainly civics education is a big part of that. But by us protecting against CRT and this Stop Woke Act, you know, we're going to be making sure that time in school is actually spent learning and not just being targets of indoctrination. And that is going to be a very good thing for parents throughout the state of Florida. So we look forward when we reconvene the legislature next month in January. We look forward to be able to making this, you know, a big part of what we're doing. We're also doing a lot of other stuff. I mean, you know, we're going to have a major program to help to give signing bonuses to police officers who move to Florida from other states because they're not being treated well there. We're going to make sure that no government or private entity in Florida is going to be facilitating Biden's reckless border policies, and we're going to have strong response there. And we're going to continue to making the state well managed and a good steward of your money. You know, I put out my budget last week, and it was $99.7 billion with over $15 billion in surplus. And the closest state to us in population is New York. They got about 3 million fewer people than us, and yet their budget, ours is 99.7 billion, theirs is like 230 billion. They have high taxes, all this other stuff, and yet our infrastructure, roads, education, higher ed, it's all better than what they're doing there, and we have the lowest taxes per capita in the country. So, and the governor has come bearing some gifts, so if you guys want a hat, I'm going to fling these into the crowd. But thank you all, and God bless you.
The liberals are so afraid of what's going on in Florida right now that this event is already on the front page of CNN's website. That's how terrified they are of this. We don't need any new titles like president of this or president of that. We need governors. We need to honor the Constitution, which states in Article 4, Section 4, we are guaranteed a republic and a republican form of government, meaning of the states, period. Whoever is president is irrelevant. Whoever is president will be made irrelevant. I'll say it a third time. The president, that title in D.C., of the quote-unquote United States, is an irrelevant title, and the more people begin to ignore this and start looking to their state governors, holding local authorities accountable for their decisions and removing them when it's necessary, until people start to do this, nothing's going to change. Things don't change from D.C. down. Trump didn't change anything. Biden didn't change anything. The reason Florida is what Florida is, and Michigan is, and Washington, and they are what they are, is because of the governors and the local authorities in those regions. Period. Florida is fantastic and constitutional and doing what it's supposed to do because of the people here. And I hope people listened really close to Jeanette Nunez. I really do. Because people say, oh, what's going to happen when DeSantis leaves? What's going to happen when, he serves his 2 terms as governor? Next batter up. Next batter up in Florida. Period. And I've tried to very much take the word America out of my lexicon, because I think it's a trap. I've tried to take the words USA and US out of my lexicon, not talk about it. Georgia and Georgians, you need to fix yourself. It isn't California's fault. You fix yourself. California, let California do what California wants to do. You see another batter up, be godly. I don't know what that means, but I hope it's positive. Republics of each, and that's literally what they intended. The founding fathers did not intend for there to be. In fact, it was the biggest bone of contention. Sorry about the camera work there. The biggest bone of contention toward ratifying the Constitution was the role of the federal government. That's why they put in all of these restrictions. That's why when they came here so many years ago, they had to set up a system where there couldn't just be another king. And what's happened in this quote-unquote country? We have now gotten into this trap of voting every 4 years for another king. And that's what everybody values. When people stop valuing when people stop valuing the role of Washington, D.C., that's when things will change. Period. That's it. I mean, there's no way around it. And I really am wanting to caution. I don't want to say I'm disappointed in, but I want to caution people about this whole, DeSantis idea that, and even he would tell you this. He, by name, is not the answer to anybody's state. A clone of him is not the answer to anybody's state. You could take Ron DeSantis and you could make him governor of Michigan, not going to change a damn thing. You could take Ron DeSantis, you could make him the governor of Michigan, and it wouldn't change a damn thing in Michigan. Michigan's problem is at its root. You could do the same thing in California. Governor DeSantis would not change California. Governor DeSantis would not change New York. It's the people of the states. He is a result. He is an effect, not a cause. Governor DeSantis is an effect, not a cause. We have a 2-1 majority, conservatives, constitutional conservatives in the Florida State House. It's what he led with. I thought, man, this sounds real familiar. It almost sounds like he's doing a Florida Maquis video. We're talking roto. That's a great analogy, Mike. That is a great analogy. If you want to fix states up north, it's going to take a roto-rooter. But Florida, 2-1 in our state house, in our Florida State House, conservatives to liberals. People think we have all these blue cities, Tampa, Miami, Gainesville, Tallahassee. That's true. That's very true. But the vast majority of people in Florida live in the suburbs and are conservative. And that's why, once again, 2-1. 2-1. And the wall, I tell you what, thank you, by the way, for being a member for 20 months. Husky, appreciate that. Build the Florida wall. We don't need a wall. We don't need a wall. We need conservatives coming here, displacing liberals. Because, believe it or not, that's how it works. When you have conservatives come here and set up shop here and get jobs here and work here, they're taking a job away from someone else, and that's usually a liberal who wants to sit at home and get paid by the government, which has stopped here, by the way. And they're going to go someplace else. They're going to go to greener pastures. You got to remember, this modern crop of liberals, wants to feel like they have political power. Notice I didn't say think, I said feel. They want to feel like they have political power, and they do not feel anymore like they have political power in Florida. So they are moving, and they are leaving. And where are they going? Woke California, woke Michigan, woke Colorado. So it's not about an overpopulation problem in Florida. It's about replacing population. And that's what's really happened. That's why we now have, for the first time in history, we outnumber. Think about this for just 1 second. In the last election cycle, the conservative candidate from the Republican Party, Mr. Trump, he won by 400,000 votes when registered Democrats outnumbered registered Republicans. Think about that for 1 minute. Now we outnumber them. What do you think's going to happen next time? See, this is the issue. This is the real issue, and we're not going to need a wall for another reason, too. And this has really rubbed some people the wrong way, but I'm going to continue to talk about this because the Fed is going to make an announcement later today. And it's not going to be pretty for Bitcoin. I know people don't want to hear this. They think I don't understand Bitcoin and that I'm totally wrong about it. But guys, the reason Bitcoin went so high had nothing to do with people adopting it as their chosen form of transactional currency. Let me say this again. The reason Bitcoin went so high recently was not because more people around the world thought, golly, this is great. I want to use this to do my daily transactions with. This is fantastic. That's not what happened. The big thing that happened was China cracked down on their miners. China cracked down on their miners and forced a lot of operations to go into Europe, where they get to run their network, their systems, for free almost. That's right. Their Bitcoin miner rigs, their little camps that they do this with, they hook them up pre-transmission in power generation in largely socialist countries. And the reason they were able to do that had to do with China. But the big institutional investors were choosing Bitcoin short term because the Fed was buying up the bond market. And I know this gets a little bit in the weeds, but the Fed is going to announce later today that they're going to start to wrap up much quicker than everybody thought their plan to keep floating the bond market by purchasing bonds, because it's really created this issue with inflation. It's a bigger driver of it. And when the Fed announces that, institutional investors in Bitcoin are going to pull their money super fast. And when they pull that money, when they pull the money out of Bitcoin, it is going to collapse. And it's going to take every other currency with it. That's going to be the issue. Because worldwide, and this is why I use this image. I would get out of gold and silver sooner rather than later too, because that's a government-run Ponzi scheme as well. The reason I used this image in yesterday's video, and I guess in the live I'll say it here, guns, drugs, and women, okay? The illegal trade and solicitation of all is a haven for Bitcoin. These are the people who are actually using Bitcoin for the most part. So when you take away the institutional investors and then you take the world's police forces going after those who are actually using it, it's going to be over. I mean, if you bought in at 20,000 or 25,000 and you're super excited because it went up to 67,000 that you've tripled your money, you're about to lose it by half or more if you stay in it. And that's not overstating the case. If you put $1,000 into Bitcoin and then you were excited, oh my gosh, it's worth $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 now, or some equivalent thereof, it's about to become worth less than 500. That's how bad it's going to get. So this is the case. This is the reality. And this is what the 13 colonies were really all about too. Think about this for a minute. Let's use Antarctica as an example. Let's pretend this video on your screen, the picture on your screen right now, is a new melted away area of Antarctica. Let's say 100 years from now, climate change warms the planet, and all of a sudden, areas of Antarctica start to spring up and sprout up. Thank you, Salty Spatula. Appreciate it. And that's exactly correct. Florida has already built a wall out of ideologies, morals, and standards that are keeping evil, self-serving people away. But let's let's stick with this analogy for a minute. Let's say you went to Antarctica in 100 years and trees were growing and the waters were full of fish and you could set up settlements. But you wanted to take dollars with you because you'd need a currency of some kind, right? You see, before you could set up your electrical infrastructure to use Bitcoin, you would need to have some way of trading and moving things around. You would need to have a new world. So you would need to have some type of a new currency. Well, you see, when the settlers came from England to the New World, all currencies of the world were there. The Spanish were there, the French were there, the Dutch were there, the English were there. They had all sorts of different currencies getting traded all back and forth. And so they had to create their own continental one to keep from getting financially slaved. If they wanted to be independent, they had to have an independent currency. The point I'm trying to make is this: Bitcoin is not an independent currency. It was marketed as one, which is why I started with this image. See, to get people to invest in it, to get normal Americans to invest in it, they had to sell the idea. They had to sell the idea that this currency was going to be independent of the dollar, and it would give you the ability to have your freedom. You would be able to go get your cabin way off in the woods, off grid. You would have the ability to feed yourself and have a little bit of wine. And so, this was the romantic idea of Bitcoin. But this was never what made it grow. This is never what made it. What made it grow was the big institutional investors and Chinese policy. And gold and silver are going to be worthless as well. Gold and silver. Silver, if you're going to make colloidal silver, is the only use I can think of for silver. And gold is an insanely heavy. I tell you what, if you guys are going to plan on traipsing off into the wilderness with your survival groups, you aren't going to need very much gold in your backpack before it gets way too flippin' heavy. It's insanely dense, insanely heavy. And once again, just like the Bitcoin keys, once you lose it, then what? No, you see, that's the thing, Paul. You don't understand the future. Gold and silver are leftovers from an age all the way up until 1900. All the way up until about the 1900s, people got around in this country, moved around in this country like they did in Bible times. Horses and carriages. All the way up into the 1900s, Paul Taylor. This is what people don't get. So if you had told somebody in 1900, you need to stop investing in the horse and carriage, something new is coming, and it's going to make the horse and carriage obsolete, people would have said, you're an idiot for saying that. We have been using horses and carriages for 1900 years. Ever since the time of Christ, a horse and carriage has never been worthless, and neither has oats and feed for the horse. So horseshoeing is the wave of the future. Horse care and animal husbandry and carriage wheels, they're all the wave of the future. How do we know this? Well, for the last 2,000 years, there has been a demand for horses and carriages. You see, that's the argument the gold and silver people are playing. That's the argument the gold and silver people are playing. They don't understand how things have changed. They don't understand it. Tangible goods, exactly right. Tools, food, water filters, solar power, medication, things that you can actually use. And we know 828. What if Florida created its own? Okay, when you hear blockchain, think Ponzi scheme. When you think blockchain is now a Ponzi scheme. It's good money after bad. It's good money after bad. This is what Ponzi schemers do. They initially go out, they run this new scam, they get a bunch of people to invest in it, and then a bunch of people make money initially. And that's true. People did initially make money with Bitcoin. That's very true. That day is over. The Ponzi scheme is getting ready to collapse. That's why Ponzi schemes are popular. People do actually make money with them for a minute, but the vast majority lose their ass. Yeah, not until, neither did the horse and carriage, Tammy Hartley. Neither did the horse and carriage. Horses and carriages were used as far back as the Egyptians. They sure were. What happened when what if somebody had told you right before the advent of the car to invest in asphalt? What if somebody said, you know what, you should invest in grease and oil and rubber for tires? You would have been called crazy. You would have been called crazy in the 1900s to invest in anything to do with the car or anything to do with gasoline. Would you have not been? The idea of the time is like, no, I'm sorry. I'm sticking with barley and oats. I'm sticking with barley and oats, and I'm sticking with horses. Because I can tell you what, in 1600, they needed barley and oats and horses and carriages, and in 1200 and in 800 AD, and all the way back in Jesus' times, they needed barley and oats and horses and carriages, and you're never going to convince me that we're not going to, in the future, need barley and oats and horses. That's exactly what the gold and silver people are doing to you right now. Ask yourself this question: if it was worth more, if they believe in the dollar collapse so much, if they believe in the dollar collapse so much, these gold and silver hucksters, why would they take your worthless dollars in exchange for their gold? Why would they sell you their gold, their physical gold? If they believe gold and silver is the wave of the future, why would you create a business selling it for dollars? Why would you create a business selling it for dollars? If you truly believe this idea, dollars are going to be worthless, but gold and silver are going to be worth a ton. Here's my gold and silver. I'll sell it to you for X amount of dollars. Why in the hell would anybody start a business doing that? It would make no sense. It would make absolutely zero sense to start a business literally doing the opposite of what you're advertising the business does. I mean, it's just it's just moronic that people would fall for this. So, there's something out there that really I probably should address more than what I'm addressing right now. I'm sure a lot of you are aware that I've done psychological operations training. There's a thing called sunk cost fallacy. I want you guys out there to write this down or type it in somewhere. It's called sunk cost fallacy. Have you guys heard this? It's what happens when, it used to happen a lot when Texas Hold'em poker was real popular. That, guys would bet and bet and bet, and it would be very clear that they were going to lose and they were going to take a hard loss. But instead of getting out, they would continue to throw bad money after good. Or pardon me, good money after bad. I don't know what's going on with me. But they would continue to throw money at a bad thing because they had this attachment. They didn't want to admit they made a mistake. They didn't want to admit they got played. They didn't want to admit it was time to get out and time to move on. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. That's why a lot of people hang on to Trump. It's called the sunk cost fallacy. They can't accept that there's a new form in the future of good, intelligent, thoughtful conservatism that is largely being promoted by Ron DeSantis. They hang on to the mean tweets. Oh, I want mean tweets and cheap gas, as if mean tweets means cheap gas. It's called the sunk, S-U-N-K, cost, C-O-S-T, fallacy. This is the issue facing so many people. because they can't. Nobody likes to admit they were duped. Nobody, it's not, it happens to everybody though. That's why a lot of big investing houses don't rely on just the advice of one person or two persons or five people. They put together large groups so that nobody can really be caught up in their own little personal war. The reason, and what a lot of people don't tell you about gold and silver, and this will be the last time I talk about this, the reason gold and silver historically held their value is because they were transactable. They are no longer transactable. You can fake. If you're off in the forest and and you're trading with somebody at some type of a trading post, and somebody hands you something that looks like silver, you're going to be able to tell for sure it's silver. The only way you can tell for sure it's silver is if there's some kind of a government stamp on it, some type of a government acknowledgement that this is 100% pure silver. In the real world, it's not transactable. Historically, it has been. For hundreds of years, it was transactable. But as technology increased, people were able to fake it. They were able to create other things that look a whole lot like silver, but they weren't silver. And the only way you could for sure know that you were getting actual silver is to get it from large government licensed organizations that say for sure that is gold, for sure that is silver. But once you do that, once you give government the power to determine, yes, that's silver, but no, that's not silver, and you don't have the ability yourself to tell how much it is or whether it's pure or whether it's not pure, it's no longer transactable. It's no longer a currency that people will value. I know this for sure. If things fall apart and I have food and I have water and I have stores of goods, there ain't no way in the world I'm personally selling it to anybody for any amount of gold or silver. Period. I don't care. Even for ammunition. I mean, I have my own ammunition, but if I have food and I have what I need to live and get through my day, and you don't because you dumped all of your money in Bitcoin and ammunition and gold, sorry for your luck. I guess that ammunition is going to give you one choice. You get to become a criminal and go take things at gunpoint and hope people ain't got enough to fight back. And that's the trap of ammunition, because ammunition is the currency of last resort, in the sense that you have to use it in a way that you can't go back from. So, but I'll leave it there. This is the reality of what's coming. Watch the Fed. Watch the Fed. Today is the second day of meetings, and they are going to wrap up their meetings, and they're going to make an announcement. Guys, get out of it. Get out of it quickly. So, thanks for hanging out. Very much appreciate it. God bless. Have a great week, and we will see you guys here in a little bit.